Good evening. As of this recording, it has been over 500 days since the last episode of SuperSmash3DS Revisited. As punishment for taking so long to get to the next episode, I've temporarily been banished to an alternate dimension where the quality of my camera audio is inexplicably poor. And totally not because I'm a dumbass and deleted my original external audio before I could go back and redo the mixing, leaving me stuck with an overly distorted and completely unusable mess, forcing me to work with the raw audio from my camera since reshooting and re-recording with my external mic would have added more time to the workload, and I've already got a lot of other shit I need to do, but now the mic I'm holding is gonna look really stupid and... You get the idea. Let's just start the video. It's been 8 years since I started making game reviews, and throughout the years, I've mentioned on a number of occasions that Super Mario World is my favorite video game of all time. There are plenty of reasons as to why, which I'll do my best to explain over the course of this video, but above all else, Super Mario World was the very first video game I ever played. Or at least the earliest one I can remember playing. The farthest my memory goes back is when I was 4 years old. My aunt was really into gaming, and while she was working at Toys R Us at the time, she got herself a Nintendo 64 and gave us her old Super Nintendo and all the games she had for it. It was hooked up to this old Zenith brand CRT television my brother and I had in our bedroom, which before then was only used to keep my uber autistic ass quiet while watching Blue's Clues or Toy Story 100 billion times a day. And it worked, but there was something different about this big gray brick with that funny looking remote coming out of it. What were these things you were supposed to put into it? Were they VHS tapes? Shows how old I am. And why was it taking so long for this thing to start playing once I turned it on? It took a couple button presses for me to find out. Suddenly there was this little fat guy standing in a grassy field. I messed around with the big plus shape on the remote, and then he started walking around. I could barely fathom what was going on. I was so used to being an observer, watching things on a TV screen play out on their own. Super Mario World was different. The visuals were bright and colorful, and the music was bouncy, so I was already hooked on that front. But I wasn't just watching Mario, I was Mario. I was the one making him jump on those weird little chestnut things. I was the one getting him farther along on his journey. I wasn't conscious of it then, but having that much influence over what was happening on screen was mind-blowing. Eventually, our old SNES stopped working, and presumably our entire collection got lost in the back rooms, but as I got older, I would recognize Mario in other games and comics, cartoons, etc. And ultimately, I became a fan of the franchise because of the memories I have of Super Mario World. I've played this game so much over the course of my life that finding all the secret exits has become muscle memory. I know where they all are, and I don't even think about it anymore. So much of how I play it is instinctual now, even spin jumping to make Mario freeze in midair when starting the game. I do that all the time, and I don't even know why. But just when I think I've found everything there is to know about this game, I'm always making new discoveries. For example, apparently there's a one-up chamber above the starting point in Morton's Castle, and while I was recording footage, I found out that Mario could use his cape to reflect Magic Koopa's magic and Charging Chuck's baseballs. Because somehow I never thought to try it until now. The Super Mario Bros. Encyclopedia offered some interesting revelations to me as well. Like, did you know that there are 14 levels in the whole game where you can make a one-up mushroom appear out of nowhere just by walking over a specific spot, or I guess hitting certain rotating blocks or something? Or that Yoshi can eat P-switches immediately after you step on them but before they disappear, and then somehow cough up another one? Or that Cape Mario can spin next to the question blocks in the one-up chambers to make the correct symbols appear over them? I didn't. Man, this book is sure gonna come in handy once I take another year and a half to get to the next video. Why does Lemmy look like he's doing the Soulja Boy dance?
Crank that soul, now I mean you! Crank that soul, now I mean...
Once I was old enough to grasp the concept of digital re-releases, whatever platform Super Mario World was made available for, I very quickly and unashamedly forked over mine and or my parents' money for it. I bought it on the Wii's Virtual Console, the new 3DS Virtual Console, the Wii U's Virtual Console, along with the Game Boy Advance version. I also got really big into lunar magic during the late 2000s, and while messing around with level layouts and making message blocks scream obscenities in all caps because curse words were just so funny to 12-year-old me, I was inadvertently studying and analyzing how the game was designed through that program. Of course, it also gave us Kaizo Mario, so not a lot of good came out of it. Except for Proton John's playthrough of it.
Move faster, Pokey! I am angry! This is my outside voice! It is very angry sounding! For the love of Batman! Jump!
God, that brings me back.
Bill Cosby!
I presume it's also because of lunar magic that we got the secret laser suit power-up hoax, which I was young, impressionable, and stupid enough to think was real. Though, given the nature of the game's actual secrets, in hindsight, I'm surprised something like this wasn't included. During the Super Mario Bros. 35th anniversary celebration, Nintendo sold these limited edition hats, pins, and t-shirts based on different Super Mario games, and the shirts came in cardboard boxes themed to replicate the packaging the original games came in. They were pretty pricey though, so obviously I wasn't going to be able to collect them all, but I knew I just had to get the Mario World shirt, and I'm glad I at least got that because I'd probably have to sell my kidneys if I could even hope to afford most of the other stuff nowadays. Then again, do I really need both of them? I was able to get my hands on a new Super Nintendo, along with a physical copy of Super Mario World and its instruction manual, all of which I still hold on to as a reminder of where it all started. And now, so much of my love for video games and creative media in general comes from this game. Mario World commercials were also some of the earliest videos I remember watching on YouTube, like those North American SNES launch ads, and that Japanese claymation one where Mario's singing in front of a microphone. Though, I think my love of Wallace and Gromit might have been what attracted me to that one in particular. Out of curiosity, while working on this video, I decided to go looking for commercials I might not have seen until now, and I found plenty, but most of them, specifically the Japanese advertisements, were more for Mario World products than tie-ins. There were some weird stop-motion, live-action hybrids, which were part of a brand deal with this Kirin lemon soda. And what makes them so weird is the fact that in one of them, Yoshi eats a green Koopa Troopa and spits out fireballs when it's supposed to be a red Koopa. Then he does it again with a Monty Mole in the second commercial, so clearly the producers weren't too concerned about following the game. There's another one for a Super Mario World desk set, which I unironically kinda want.
Wow, this desk is so empty!
There's this legitimately pretty cool Yoshi toy with a stretchable tongue, and you flick it to have the tongue latch onto these cards with pictures of berries and enemies on them as if Yoshi's eating them. No joke, this is really neat. But then there's this other Yoshi toy with light-up eyes that's really creepy, so appropriately, the commercial is almost shot like a horror film. And by the end, I guess they learned to submit to their new battery-powered overlords? As one would in that situation. I find it funny how the Japanese ad stuck closer to the game's cutesy nature, for the most part, while the American commercials tried to make it look more badass, with guys making faces like they just got kicked in the nuts. I didn't realize just how melodramatic a lot of these were until I watched them again.
Suddenly the sky is a little clearer, the character's smarter, the danger's fiercer, the challenge a whole lot tougher.
You sure about that?
It's a bit more exciting, a bit more colorful, a bit more realistic.
What, dinosaurs? Giant angry bullets? Caterpillars wearing Ugg boots? Oh yeah, much more realistic. I guess marketing had to be a little more aggressive in some territories, because while Super Mario World already had a bit of a tumultuous development cycle, the shadow of the Sega Genesis and a tiny little TurboGrafx 16 cloud were looming over for much of its production. Both systems were already out by the time work on the game began, and the Genesis campaign in the US was infamously brutal, as Sega sold its 16-bit console as the better, faster, edgier, more mature alternative to Nintendo. Internally, Shigeru Miyamoto, Takashi Tezuka, and their entire staff were going into the Mario World project right after finishing Super Mario Bros. 3, which they'd already spent years pouring their blood, sweat, and tears into. Literally. And with Miyamoto having other SNES/Super Famicom launch titles to supervise, he had to take a more hands-off approach in his role as a producer, essentially leaving Tezuka and program director Toshihiko Nakago to their own devices. Things were made a little easier once the SNES was delayed, so the developers could find a little more excitement in playing with the newer, less restrictive hardware compared to that of the NES. But they made sure to steer clear of adding elements that disrupted the flow of the gameplay and served no purpose other than flexing the system's capabilities. Super Mario World still had plenty to show off, like bigger sprites, more complex scaling options, transparent textures, and advanced audio. Regardless, it's obviously not as technically impressive when compared to the games that came after it, like Super Metroid or Donkey Kong Country, but the developers weren't concerned about just showing off the SNES hardware, they just wanted to make a great game. And obviously, they did. You know, for as much as I feel my early reviews don't hold up well, after rewatching my original Super Mario World video, I think it's one of the better reviews I did from that time. Or one of the least cringy, anyway. And there are some things about it that I remember fondly. It's the first review I did entirely using my own recorded game footage, and it was also the first time I used the Paper Mario font, which I still use today. It's called Hey Gorgeous, by the way, if any of you are curious. I also love the Whose Line Is It Anyway Doctor Who shirt that Cartoon Marc wears in the video, though I'm not sure if the Mad sketch came before or after I used that design. Unsurprisingly, my thoughts on this game haven't changed that much since I first reviewed it, but considering how much it meant to me then, and still to this day, I think I failed at truly getting that across in both my writing and delivery. So when I started doing Super Smash 3DS Revisited, I knew that I absolutely had to get this one right. If I'm going to dedicate an entire hour-long video to what I consider the greatest game ever made and really do it justice, I have to go all out and pay it proper tribute. And that's why I ended up recording 3 separate playthroughs. A 100% run, a playthrough the Switch Online version where I don't go to any of the Switch palaces, and just for the hell of it, a completed run through the GBA port. Because that's just how I am when it comes to this game. Extra. It's also why I'm presenting myself on camera this time and not hiding behind a cartoon lookalike. Because honestly, I can't think of a better way to emphasize just how much I love this game and just how much it means to me than to show you with my own hideous face. And I'm aware that we're probably well over 10 minutes into the video by now and I haven't even started getting into the game yet, but if you ask me, I consider that an improvement. Besides, that was just a sample of the incomprehensible gushing that I'll be serving you today. And I'm not cutting any corners this time. So, if you're still with me, and I doubt very many of you are, let's go ahead and give Super Mario World the treatment it deserves.
Let's go!
In my original video, I gave a complete plot summary taken word for word from the instruction manual, while also going off script, riffing on it, and not being funny. But here's the gist of it. After Bowser and the Koopalings were defeated during the events of Super Mario Bros. 3, Mario, Luigi, and Princess Toadstool decided to go to Dinosaur Land for a relaxing vacation. Although how they came to the conclusion that being surrounded by dinosaurs would be in any way relaxing is beyond me. But while the brothers take a snoozer on the beach, Bowser and his forces capture the princess. Or maybe it was the Rock, I don't know. When they come to, Mario and Luigi go looking for her until they stumble on a giant egg in the middle of a forest, which a dinosaur named Yoshi then breaks out of. He explains to them that Bowser trapped him in there after also capturing his friends and sealing them in their own eggs. I also want to point out that in the game itself, you're able to visit Yoshi's house and read this message he leaves behind, where he says he's gone out to rescue his friends, and the level where he explains what happened to them after you hatch him for the first time is literally off to the right. So I guess that means he didn't even get 10 feet away from his house before Bowser caught him. Great job, buddy. In short, Super Mario World predictably follows another variation of the Bowser captures Peach scenario, only far less involved than Mario 3's narrative. But while storytelling in Mario games means as much to Nintendo as the critical reception to the Super Mario Bros. Movie, as in nothing, there was clearly an attempt on the part of the developers to give the overall adventure some entertainment value that wasn't exactly all there before. Think about it. What happens when you beat the bosses in previous Mario games? Nothing. They fell into lava, dropped off the stage, vanished into thin air, or exploded, and then you just went off to the next world. But clearing boss stages in this game rewards you with these things called cutscenes, where we see Mario escape with the Yoshi eggs and then demolish the Koopalings' castles. And he doesn't tear them down in the exact same way every time. He'll smash them with a hammer, stomp them into the ground, use a giant mop to wipe them from existence, lift them out of the ground and kick them off to the side. These moments give the game such an insane amount of charm, and now the means of defeating bosses and carrying on to the next world actually give you something to look forward to and make you want to keep playing. Wait a minute, Donut Land? Oh, I thought it was Donut Plains. One of my favorite cutscenes is when Mario tries to blow up Ludwig's castle, but then it rockets into this mountain off in the distance and gives it a little bandage, which then stays there on the world map for the rest of the game. That's another thing that helps make Super Mario World stand out from its predecessors. Dinosaur Land isn't just a change of scenery, it's almost like a character in and of itself. It shares a bit in common with the Mushroom Kingdom, but nothing is as it seems here. Koopa Troopas walk on two legs, blocks turn into flat panels and spin around instead of breaking when hit from below, lest we forget the occasional floating green balls. Bowser's castle is filled with ninjas, even though they're supposed to exist in people's dreams. Okay, Nintendo, is Mario 2 USA canon or not? There's also that one level, Chocolate Island 2, where your progress depends on the coins you collect and the time at which you go through the warp pipes to get to the next part of the stage.
Nothing makes sense here, man. The only thing that does make sense is that nothing makes sense.
I'm also starting to think the land itself might be some kind of actual living creature just by the way it changes after you beat each stage. Hills rise up, bridges appear out of thin air, the sheer existence of the Forest of Illusion, the fact that mountains can feel pain. It's like Strange World, if the creators actually cared about the final product. Animation isn't just for kids, goddammit! There are even some hints of continuity. The sunken ghost ship that you go through just before reaching the Valley of Bowser is a crashed airship from Super Mario Bros. 3. It even has a magic question mark ball that you get from beating Boom Boom in that game. And this checks out, because while you mostly fought Boom Boom in the fortress levels, in World 8, you also fought him on airship levels. And the fact that most of the enemies that appear in this level are boos could indicate that they were minions that died in the crash. Hey kids, play Super Mario World! Be dazzled by the colorful graphics! Tap your toes to the catchy music! Try your best to avoid the ghosts of dozens of Mario characters that were brutally and horrifically killed as the direct result of your actions! Rated E for everyone! By now, I think it's safe to say that Dinosaur Land is completely different from the settings in the first few Mario games, and this is true in both the location and how you actually go from place to place. Super Mario Bros. 3 brought the concept of world maps to the series, but the worlds themselves were split off and divided into their own isolated sections. Super Mario World has a world map system as well, but now the worlds are interconnected. Once you take out one of the Koopalings, getting to the next world is simply a matter of continuing down the path you were already on. The world in the game's title could not be more appropriate, because it really is just one big world. Mario 3 maps were also very flat, while the Mario World maps have curved pathways and visible cliff sides, so you can tell these are actual islands and mountains, not like those carpet playmats with the streets on them. One feature that I always loved was how you could revisit levels you've already beaten, and then pause the game and hit the select button to return to the map screen. It's a great way to save yourself from taking a fall, and it even saves your progress, so if you got any power-ups or extra lives before exiting, you get to keep them. And if you pass through a checkpoint before quitting, next time you go back to that stage, it starts you off at the checkpoint. I used to love exploiting this feature, especially in Forest of Illusion 1. I'd get to the checkpoint, hit the roulette block, wait for the item to change into a Starman, grab it, run through the enemies ahead of me to rack up lives, pause and quit, and start all over until I maxed out my life count. This was until I discovered the infinite lives trick in Donut's Secret one, which is a little harder to pull off, but in the long run saved me a lot of time. And rendered the elusive 3-up moon, which gives you 3 lives, completely useless every time I found one. Since we're not in the Mushroom Kingdom this time, the Toad houses introduced in Mario 3 are nowhere to be seen. But while there aren't necessarily mini-games to play on the world map, in a way they were actually included in the levels themselves, making the process of going from point A to point B almost like a game within a game. There are the obligatory bonus areas like the 1-up chambers I brought up earlier, where you hit rows of question blocks in a certain order to make 1-up mushrooms appear. But Super Mario World also introduces the concept of there being giant collectible coins in every level. In this case, the Dragon Coins. Most stages have 5 of them hidden throughout each one, and grabbing them all gives you an extra life. Though, I still don't understand why they're called Dragon Coins when they have Yoshi's face on them. Some levels also have these bonus blocks that can either act as regular coin blocks or give you a 1-up mushroom if you hit them after getting at least 30 coins. Along with the returning P-switch that turns coins into blocks and also makes secret doors appear now, there are gray P-switches that turn enemies like Spinies into silver coins and reward you with Big Shock and extra life if you grab them all. Ghost houses might even be considered minigames to an extent. This is a new level theme where your goal is to solve puzzles and get past various ghostly foes to find your way out. The end goal in most of the main levels is presented by 2 posts with a bar that moves up and down between them. You can walk through the post normally and clear the stage, but if you touch the bar at a particular height, it gives you points. Then when you get over 100 points, you go to this bonus game where you can earn extra lives by matching up panels. I don't know if this is another case of muscle memory though, but one thing I noticed when playing through this game again was how whenever I would jump up and hit a pole at the end of a ghost house level, 95% of the time I got 26 points. This happened once in the Donut Secret House, Vanilla Ghost House, and Choco Ghost House, twice in the Forest Ghost House, and in the first Donut Ghost House, I got it 5 separate times. Meanwhile, in the GBA version, the number I got instead was 27. Maybe my copy was personalized by Weird Al Yankovic? Hopefully you can see by now that Super Mario World isn't as straightforward as the games that came before it, but what else I find so fascinating about it is just how carefree it is and how people approach it. Shut up! This is a game that anyone can play however they like, and seems perfectly fine with letting players flip it on its head. It's apparent in many ways, but none completely affect the overall experience like the Switch Palaces. Sometimes you might come across these different colored block-shaped outlines in various stages, but you can turn them into solid exclamation blocks by going to the yellow, green, red, and blue Switch Palaces, and then jumping on the corresponding colored switches. These were added as a difficulty spike, so some levels might be more comfortable if the blocks are solid, and leaving them outlined might make those levels harder. Going to the Switch Palaces is something I can't help but do every time I play this game. Again, muscle memory. So I wasn't sure how much harder the game would be before I started my no switches run. Now that I've done it, it's not like going from Mario 1 to Lost Levels, but because I can't help but hit the switches as soon as possible in normal playthroughs, I've relied on these blocks so much that getting through the game without them was a pretty difficult adjustment. So, kudos, Nintendo. You know what I never understood, though? The fact that the yellow and green blocks are the only ones that give you power-ups. The yellow blocks give you super mushrooms, and the green blocks give you cape feathers. Now, I don't know exactly what the red and blue blocks could have given you, but you know what, I'm wasting battery on my camera, and it's not really that big of a deal anyway, so I'm just gonna move on. Now, of course, you can't even get to the Switch Palaces without finding hidden routes on the world map. Mario 3 maps had branching pathways, but progression was still mostly linear. In Super Mario World, you could make alternate paths appear by finding secret exits within certain stages. Sometimes it's another set of posts with a pole in between them, and sometimes it's a matter of bringing giant keys to a keyhole. Unless you're stupid like me and accidentally drop one into a bottomless pit. Whoops. But how do you know which levels have secret exits and which ones don't? Well, it's hard to tell with ghost houses, but with other stages, it's really simple. On the world map, levels marked with a yellow dot mean they only have one standard exit, and levels marked with a red dot indicate there's more than one exit. People might not pick up on this right away, but notice how the first area of the game, Yoshi's Island, consists of only yellow dotted stages, and the very first level of the next area, Donut Plains, has a red dot. This time you're going in with a feeling that there's something different about this stage, which makes it much more of a pleasant surprise when you find the keyhole above the normal exit. Then by the time you get to the Forest of Illusion, an area that consists of mostly red dotted levels, you'll know that you have to look for both the normal exit and the secret exit in order to make it out. It's not too cryptic, but it's not too obvious either, and the game does such a great job at encouraging you to go exploring and think outside the box. Chocolate Island 3's normal exit just sends you around in a circle on the world map, but it's only when you go under it and find the secret exit that you can finally move forward. Or you can do this. Hidden paths don't just lead to Switch Palaces either. On top of the returning castle levels, which are present on the main route and have you square off against the Koopalings, there are also fortress levels that each end with a fight against this giant rhino thing named Reznor. Not sure why he's named after the lead singer of Nine Inch Nails, but it's fun seeing Nintendo of America keep with the music-based naming conventions. Besides, sounds better than Booey Booey. Booey Booey! Oh, baby, that's a rhino thing. Yeah. Then there's the top secret area, which is the quickest and easiest way to get some extra power-ups should you feel the need to prepare for any greater dangers. Remember how Super Mario Odyssey focused a lot on the element of surprise, but then on repeated playthroughs you would know what to expect, so nothing really came as a surprise to you anymore? Super Mario World is like that too, but in the case of both games, I never get tired of it because of just how well they play and just how packed they are in terms of content. I also love how Mario World gives you little glimpses of later parts of the map, like seeing Donut Plains when you reach the Yellow Switch Palace, or going through this warp pipe next to the Donut Secret House and ending up on top of a mountain overlooking the Valley of Bowser. Being able to go through the same world in so many different ways makes progression, in my opinion, more exciting than Mario 3. Like in Vanilla Dome, you could take the normal route and get to the third castle, or you could take an alternate route that leads you straight to the fourth castle. But if one world wasn't enough, the Giga Chads over at Nintendo just had to slip in 2 more. You see those giant star-shaped spots scattered throughout Dinosaur Land? These are paths to the Star Road that don't just take you to different parts of the map, meaning you could hypothetically get to Bowser's castle and beat the game in less than 20 minutes. But the gateways are tied together by the Star World, which has its own stages with multiple exits. Then once you clear them all, another Star Road space will show up on top of this mountain in the center of the map that takes you to the Special Zone. It's home to some of the trickiest levels in the game, with the most 90s names of all. Gnarly, tubular, way cool, awesome, groovy, mondo, outrageous, and funky. They're like Lucky Charms marshmallows, how could you forget? Obviously this was the localization team's doing. In Japan, each level is called Fun Course 1, Fun Course 2, etc. You think if they did something like this nowadays, they'd use terms like lit, or Riz, or bussin' or bussin'? Hope not. I hardly even know what any of those mean. Now, I might have said the levels in this world are some of the trickiest in the game, but most of them actually aren't that hard. They just have some annoying design elements, like added enemies and different terrain. This even applies to Tubular, and anyone that saw my original video might recall just how much I used to hate this stage. And it's still kind of annoying, but now I don't think it's all that bad. Awesome and Outrageous are far more tense if you ask me. The former because of the ice physics, and the latter because of the insane amount of enemies it throws at you. But getting through the special zone is worth it for 3 reasons. Firstly, one of the levels you can play through is the same one featured on the title screen. Second, there's a giant Super Famicom logo in the sky. And third, once you beat the final stage and are rewarded with the title of Super Player, returning to Dinosaur Land reveals that the seasons have changed from summer to fall. So time moves differently in the special zone apparently, and from the looks of it, Chocolate Island has now become Mint Chocolate Island. Tasty. Most of the enemies are also changed, so Bullet Bills become Pidgeot Bills, Piranha Plants now have Jack-o'-lantern heads, and Koopa Troopas wear masks that vaguely resemble Mario. It's all purely cosmetic, their patterns don't change at all. Same goes for the Charging Chucks. These are new enemies introduced in this game that all wear the same football gear, even when their actions have nothing to do with football. The reason for this is because the developers felt creating entirely new sprites for each variation of Charging Chuck would have wasted resources. And they're right. But you'd think with Mario being gone for so long, these guys would have figured out what sport they're supposed to be playing by now. The one that throws baseballs is even called a Confused Chuck. Well, at least they're conscious of their behavior. Frankly though, this name could be given to every Chuck variant in this game. Or might I also suggest calling them idiots? Like sometimes if they're behind a wall of blocks when I get close to them, they'll start running towards me and break through some of the blocks, but then just stop, jump around, or walk back and forth like they forgot what they were supposed to do.
I'm right here, over here!
There are a few Chucks that show some bit of spatial awareness, however, and this guy was really determined to get me. Too bad he just fell right into that lava pit. If only he could see more than what was directly in front of him. Okay, so Super Mario World clearly has a lot going on when it comes to the world, or worlds, that the game takes place in, but as for what you do within those worlds, i.e. the actual gameplay, you might look at this and think it's just Mario 3, but with better graphics. And while it does follow many of the same principles, how exactly Mario gets through each stage involves you having to perform a plethora of new techniques. Koopa Troopas actually pop out of their shells now when you jump on them, so you can either kick their shells right back at them, or even throw them upward to hit blocks or kill enemies from below. You can hijack Lakitu clouds and reach higher places. You can hit these blocks to generate trails of coins in whatever direction you press on the D-pad, and then hit a P-switch to make them solid and use them as platforms. Although this really only means anything when you have to find the secret exit in the Valley Ghost House. Or as I like to call it, the worst one. Super Mario World also introduces one of Mario's trademark on-again, off-again abilities, the spin jump. Your normal jump is assigned to the B button, while you perform the spin jump by pressing the A button. And while spinning, you can break rotating blocks, completely obliterate enemies, or bounce off of thwomps and saw blades. But the rotating blocks can also help you to some extent in levels like Forest of Illusion 3, where enemies float around in bubbles and pop when they touch solid objects. So you can hit the rotating blocks, and while they're spinning, the bubbles will float right through them. In non-auto-scrolling levels, you can also use the L and R buttons to pan the screen left or right, which some might say is kind of pointless, but I think it helps you get a lookout for enemies and obstacles that you might not see coming, like those ceiling spikes in Roy's Castle, which seem to fall on their own once they come into view. Oh, and you can make Mario look up. They didn't have to put that in the game, but I'm a sucker for little things like this. And does anyone else love making Mario duck in time to the music? Any fan of the classic Mario games might agree that talking about this game without comparing it to Super Mario Bros. 3 is virtually impossible. the past 30 minutes are proof of that. Hell, Nintendo even ported Mario 3 to the SNES to test the graphical capabilities of the system, which influenced the early stages of Mario World's development. So the comparisons are even more valid considering how Mario 3 is so deeply rooted in this game's DNA. It's pretty clear which of them I prefer, but one thing I'll always admire about Mario 3 is the wide assortment of power-ups it had for you to take advantage of. And it's safe to say that Super Mario World doesn't have nearly as many. Now, while I'm sure that may be a turnoff for a lot of people, it doesn't really bother me as much because I think it helps give the game a greater focus on platforming. And where it lacks in the way of power-ups, it makes up for that with what I think are the greatest controls in the history of Mario games, and possibly video games in general. For as much as I still enjoy the previous games, adjusting to how Mario handled could be more challenging than even the toughest of boss fights. I played those games multiple times, so it's not that cumbersome for me to go back to them, but for as adaptable as I may be, Mario still felt either too slippery, too floaty, or not floaty enough. Super Mario World already does so many things right, but when it comes to Mario's physics, it absolutely perfected them and set the standard for how 2D Mario games should feel and control. His speed, his weight, his momentum, his traction, 10 out of 10, all across the board. There's legitimately nothing wrong here, and if you ask me, controlling Mario or any other video game character has never felt this satisfying before or since. That's not to say good controls are all you have to rely on for the adventure, because Super Mario World still has its fair share of power-ups for you to utilize. It also has an item inventory system like in Mario 3, but how it works is very different. Mario 3 had it so that you could save a bunch of power-ups and cycle through them on the world map. In this game, you have what's called an item stock, represented by this little box to the left of the timer. In normal stages, when you grab a power-up, whichever one you already had then appears in the item stock. Then, when you take a hit and revert to your small form, the power-up slowly falls from the box, making it available for you to use again. Or you can make it fall manually by pressing the select button at any time. Is it nicer to have more than one power-up on hand? Yeah, kinda, but taking hits and trying to get through tougher levels without being able to go through your inventory until you get sent back to the world map first was also pretty annoying. The item stock is basically the equivalent of having an item inventory in the actual stages, and seeing how this feature's been brought back in a lot of future games, it's gotta be pretty handy. And yeah, I think it is. As for what kind of power-ups you can expect to find in this game, well, obviously the Super Mushroom, the Starman, and the Fire Flower are back. And in another series first, you can turn enemies into coins by throwing fireballs at them. But there are also 2 new power-ups, one of which is incredibly situational, admittedly not very useful, and doesn't appear that much throughout the game. And that's the P-Balloon, or Power Balloon, however you want to call it. It blows Mario up like a balloon and makes him slowly float around. There's something appealing about it, especially if you're really into this kind of stuff, which seems to be a lot of people, but you know, who am I to judge? But I'd probably like it more if it functioned the way it does in Super Mario Maker 2. Although, that still doesn't stop it from getting completely overshadowed by the Cape Feather. I'm still waiting on that Macy's Day balloon, by the way. The Cape Feather works like the Super Leaf in that it gives Mario a spin attack that can kill enemies more easily, and you can glide by holding down the jump button instead of tapping it repeatedly. But it also has a flight mechanic that's a little trickier to pull off. As Raccoon Mario, you just had to build up enough speed, unless you're using a P-Wing, and mash the jump button to stay in the air and gain some extra height. Cape Mario still has to build up speed, but to make him fly, you have to hold down the run button, jump, and tap the D-pad in the opposite direction of where you're facing to stay in the air. I know there are people out there who could never understand how exactly flying with the cape works, and apparently many of the game's testers struggle with it as well, but that's the best I can do to explain it. When I first reviewed this game, I called the Cape Feather the single greatest power-up in Mario history, and I'm not sure if I still agree with that. I still love using it, and I do think it's better than the Super Leaf, only because it has a more reliable flight mechanic, at least to those that can figure out how to perform it successfully. But I must not have understood then that the flight controls aren't as easy to use for other people as they are for me. In that sense, however, the Cape Feather might just be one of the most complex power-ups in the entire franchise. If you can't get a feel for the flight ability, you still have the spin attack to rely on, but once you master the flying controls, then congratulations, you've broken Super Mario World. Are some levels giving you a hard time on the ground? Or do you just not feel like getting through them the old-fashioned way? Well, then you can just fly right over them. This goes back to what I was saying before about the game being so laid back about how you approach it. It's so easy to break, and it doesn't even care. As long as you don't pirate it. Look at me! I'm going so high you can barely even see me! Ah, stupid Koopa, you threw off my groove! I sound like Christopher Walken when I said that. You threw off my groove, wow. Now, if you want to get technical, Super Mario World doesn't just have 2 new power-ups, so yeah, let's finally address the adorable green dinosaur in the room. Ever since the original Super Mario Bros., Miyamoto had apparently always envisioned Mario riding some kind of animal, but it was considered impossible to achieve on the NES hardware, at least at the time the games were made. So once they jumped to the Super Nintendo, they figured it could finally be done. Thus, Super Mario World marks the debut of Yoshi, who was also intended to be a subspecies of Koopa, with his saddle doubling as a shell. Well, so much for that lore. Yoshi's your new best buddy that pops up constantly throughout the game, as Mario can hatch him from Yoshi eggs and then ride him like a horse. A horse with some surprisingly sturdy footwear, as he can walk over spiked hazards, jump off enemies like urchins no problem, and kill regular bad guys with a single stomp. If jumping on them isn't your style, then bonking him on the head causes Yoshi to stick his tongue out and use it to eat enemies or grab things like keys and power-ups. Even through walls. So what, PETA? You're gonna accuse Mario of skinning live tanukis and wearing their fur as a costume? But you don't even bat an eye when he repeatedly beats a baby dinosaur and forces it to do his bidding? It's almost as if you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Levels also might have berries for Yoshi to eat, which I always thought were apples, but if he has enough of them, he'll lay an egg that hatches into a power-up, or these clouds that drop smiley-faced coins down on you, and eventually a 1-up if you grab them all. Yoshi's digestive tract must be really messed up. Speaking of Yoshi putting things into his body, that sounded better in my head when I wrote that, if those happen to be Koopa shells, they can give him different attributes based on the color of the shell. If it's green, he spits it out like a projectile. If it's red, he spits out 3 fireballs. If it's yellow, he can do a super stomp and kill any nearby enemies. And if it's blue, he takes some broken wings and learns to fly. Wings can also pop up from question blocks in certain stages, and touching them while riding Yoshi takes you to a bonus area where you can fly around and grab some coins. It also turns him into an Eiffel 65 joke that I refuse to make because I'm better than that. Actually, I'm not, but aren't I showing an impressive amount of restraint? Yeah, Koopas and exclamation blocks don't just come in different colors, Yoshis do as well. They're not as common as green Yoshis, though you pretty much only find them in the Star World. But no matter what colored Koopa shells they eat, red Yoshi always spits fire, yellow Yoshi always super stomps, and blue Yoshi always flies. And since flying is my favorite thing to do in this game, I love using blue Yoshis the most. Really? Nobody cares what music you listen to, asshole. Flying on them while in your cape form also requires you to hold the jump button down instead of tapping it repeatedly, and after building enough speed, you get some serious airtime, making levels like Cheese Bridge area one of my favorite levels to break. Also because it's not nearly as fun to play through normally. Each Yoshi variant lets Mario take an extra hit without losing his power-up, but instead it makes Yoshi run off. Fortunately though, you can get back on him, unless he runs off a cliff and into a bottomless pit. Or if that happens. But at any time, you can press the A button to jump off of Yoshi yourself. And not only is this incredibly fun to do in super tight spaces, but doing this in midair gives you some extra height, which is good for reaching areas like the keyhole in Vanilla Dome 1 without activating the red switch, or getting under the normal exit in Cheesebridge area to run towards the secret exit. Sorry buddy, a sacrifice had to be made. Wow, I never felt bad about this in the heat of gameplay, but looking back, the amount of times I've had to let Yoshi die for my sake is kind of disturbing. I've dropped him into lava on 2 separate occasions, and I've sent him falling to his death to save myself from missing the goal. But to be fair, there was one case in the GBA version that was a complete accident, and it was when I unintentionally nudged Yoshi into a pit in Donut Plains 1. No, I didn't mean it! Here, if it makes things even between us, I'll drop myself off this time.
I actually didn't mean to do that. It was just a goof. But don't tell Yoshi. I don't want to hurt his feelings.
Of the many great new additions to this game, Yoshi might be the greatest of them all. He's super versatile in his own abilities, and so many new platforming opportunities open up when using him. Yoshi would pop up again in other games after Super Mario World, but he's never been as fun to play with as he is here. The closest I can think of is Galaxy 2, but
let's not get ahead of ourselves.
For as great as he is, however, Yoshi does come with one minor setback, and it's the fact that he can't be used in castles, fortress, or ghost house levels. Instead, Mario just leaves him waiting outside. The one exception is the sunken ghost ship, only because it technically doesn't count as either. I'd say this limitation is warranted because fortresses and castles might have been made too much easier if you could use Yoshi. Plus, they weren't really built for him anyway, so there wouldn't be a point in it. I do love touching keyholes with Yoshi and making him spit the key out. Look, it's Keyface! Going back to the castle levels for a second, in my original Super Mario World review, I didn't really talk about the boss battles that much. And from what I remember, the reason why is because when I was writing the script, I honestly just forgot to mention them, and I didn't realize it until when I was already recording the voiceover, which is why I very offhandedly said, oh yeah, the bosses are kind of fun. But looking back, maybe I forgot to write about them because they were just so pathetically easy that they just never really registered with me. Mario games have always kind of struggled with boss battles, especially in their early days, but while Mario World bosses are a little more involved than its predecessors, it still doesn't take that much to beat them. The Reznor fights all play out exactly the same, but at least you can jump onto one of the platforms and look up so that when the screen freezes, you can have Mario stare at the timer, which is slightly amusing. As for the Koopalings, all of their fights are mostly recycled, but because there's an odd number of them, Ludwig is the only one with his own fight. Meanwhile, Larry's fight is the same as Iggy's, but with 3 lava bubbles coming up from below. Roy's is the same as Morton's, except the walls slightly close in on you every time you land a hit. And Wendy's is the same as Lemmy's, with, again, added lava bubbles. On the other hand, we have the final fight against Bowser, which is definitely the best of the bunch. It's still not that hard, but compared to his encounters in Mario 1 and Mario 3, he definitely puts up more of a challenge. We even get the introduction of the Koopa Clown Car. So, that's neat. I also didn't realize until now that this was supposed to be taking place on the roof of his castle, but I guess they should have put 2 and 2 together with the black sky, the castle-like structures below me, and the thunder and lightning effects. Oh, see what I mean? I'm learning more about this game all the time. Taking him down is reasonably simple. You just grab these Mecha Koopas and throw them up so that they can fall down and bop him in the head. Then dodge all the fire, the occasional giant bowling ball, what the hell? And the super mushrooms Peach tries to give you because you're already in your cape form and none of them are really going to help you now. 3 phases later, Bowser flies off into the distance and the princess is saved. Mario's adventure is over. Mario, the princess, Yoshi, and his friends are going to take a vacation. Why aren't there any spaces after the commas? Who cares? We've beaten Super Mario World. But we're not done yet, because now it's time to move on to the Game Boy Advance version, which was released as the second installment of the Super Mario Advance series in the early 2000s. I've already talked about this game in my video on Mario remakes featuring Nintendo Drew, but I also mentioned Mario Advance 2 in my original Super Mario World video. And I wasn't very kind to it then. That was all because of the sound quality, which undoubtedly took the biggest hit, and still makes certain instruments sound more like bodily functions. And if we're gonna stick with presentation for a second, the colors are much more washed out and less saturated, but original GBA models didn't have backlit screens like the later SP models did, so that's perfectly reasonable. When I was younger, I wasn't able to appreciate the compromises that had to be made to get this game running on the Game Boy Advance. I came around to doing so once I recorded it for the Mario Remakes video, but I wasn't expecting my thoughts on this version to change even more after playing it again for this video. It starts with this charming little opening cutscene showing Mario, Luigi, and Peach arriving in Dinosaur Land in a hot air balloon with an M on it. Then Mario and Luigi grab some cape feathers and go flying off, but when they get back, Peach is gone, and only her picnic basket is left behind. So now it seems like Mario and Luigi got so distracted that they unintentionally let Peach get taken. Or maybe she saw a butterfly and wandered off. Why do I imagine Mario characters having short attention spans? That's not the only new cutscene they added, because there are others you get as a reward for getting all the dragon coins, which I didn't do, and one that you get for finding all the exits, which basically reveals how Koopa Troopas become masked Koopas. So it was Luigi all along! Traitor! I love these cutscenes though. They're super cute, the added context is appreciated, and they help give this version its own unique flavor. I also love how Luigi runs around frantically behind Mario when you start the game, like he's freaking out about Peach going missing. It's such a great character moment for him. Luigi isn't just there for show, because now you can actually switch between him and Mario on the world map, and they each have their own physics. The flavor text was updated as well to include both Mario and Luigi, and whoever's shown rescuing Yoshi eggs and demolishing the Koopalings' castles depends on which brother you selected. They still call it Donut Land instead of Donut Plains, however, and they also refer to Iggy as crazed now instead of demented. So, was that considered too offensive in 2002? Mario pretty much plays exactly the same as he did in the original, and Luigi has his higher jump and slippery traction that he usually has in these games, but the spin jump is now assigned to the R button, while pressing the L button combined with directions on the D-pad lets you scroll the screen up, down, left, or right. This is pretty much essential now because of the screen crunch, which can easily lead you to taking hits from enemies and hazards that are barely even visible, and, whatever just happened there. Super Mario Advance 2 also makes some slight changes to the level design. For one thing, the placement of dragon coins is a little different, and finding them can actually be pretty tricky, so you really gotta look out for them and time your jumps just right to reach them. Dragon coins and checkpoint markers were also added to levels that didn't originally have them, like most of the castles and ghost houses. And I'm not sure if this was present in the original game too, but I think they made it so that the dragon coins in bonus rooms don't count for the overall total, because in Donut Secret 1, I got the bonus dragon coins in the P-Balloon section, but then the others in the rest of the level were still there. So I technically got 7 dragon coins in this stage. Some levels also got additional power-up blocks, which are always nice, but then, for whatever reason, they'll do things like put the keyhole in Donut Plains 1 between 2 warp pipes, modify the route to the keyhole in Star World 2, and add a time limit to the Bowser fight. Like, why? Oh, and in the original Japanese version of Super Mario World, Yoshi could eat the dolphins in levels like Vanilla Secret 3, but in the international version, the one we got in the US, they changed it so that he couldn't. But then they made it so that he could across every version of Mario Advance 2. I mean, okay, but why? Then there are some changes that don't really affect the quality of the game, but selfishly just kind of annoy me, personally. Like in the Cheese Bridge area, the saws move at slightly different intervals now, so I can't play through this level the way I usually prefer to. And how come the music on the title screen restarts when the demo loops around? Where's the Super Famicom logo in the special zone? How come the ceiling spikes in Roy's castle actually fall when I get close to them and not just when the camera brings them into view? Why can't I make Yoshi spit the key out when touching the keyholes anymore? Come on, Nintendo, that was the best part! Hashtag release the key face cut! Okay, obviously I'm not petty enough to let things like that ruin the game for me anymore. In all seriousness, while I'd be lying if I said I found the GBA version overall to be better than the original, there are plenty of aspects to it that I like. Some I'll even go so far as to call improvements. When Mario took a hit in the SNES version, no matter what form he was in, he always reverted to small Mario. Now when he or Luigi take a hit in either their fire form or their cape form, they'll instead revert back to their super form. I also found that your life counter goes above 99 now, too, because when I did the infinite 1-up trick in Donut Secret 1, I got up to 776 lives before timing out. Then once I finished the game, I maxed out at 999. When you hit a multi-coin block, all the coins come out at once, and there's even a sound effect that plays when you hit a bonus block indicating whether you get a 1-up or not. I mean, just showing the 1-up mushroom come out was more than enough, but I still kind of appreciate that. My favorite changes, though, are the ones they made to Yoshi. In the original, when Yoshi would gobble up baddies, most of the time he'd just swallow them whole. In the GBA version, he'll temporarily hold certain enemies in his mouth, and you can either wait for him to swallow them, or spit them out and hurl them at other bad guys to kill them. Best of all is what they do with the different colored Yoshis. After first hatching them in the Star World, you can then hatch them from Yoshi eggs in normal levels depending on which form you're in. So if you're Fire Mario, you get a red Yoshi, and if you're Cape Mario, you get a blue Yoshi. This is a fantastic change, and one that almost single-handedly makes up for any of the gripes I had with this version before. I might still prefer the SNES game, but nitpicks aside, I consider Mario Advance 2 to be on par with the original, which is a remarkable feat. Seriously, this is a damn good remake, and one I look forward to playing again very soon. And I guess that might be sooner than later, because, of course, as I'm working on this video, Nintendo announces that Super Mario Advance 1, 2, and 3 are coming to the Switch Online service. So, yeah, I guess this video came out at an appropriate time? Yeah, thanks, Nintendo. Perfection is a standard that we expect from ourselves and the media we consume, but more often it poses a string of questions with no real definitive answers. Like, what makes something or someone truly perfect? Can something or someone be flawed to a certain degree, but still be considered perfect? And if so, is it in spite of that, or because of that? Well, how do we perceive anything? Because each of us has a different point of view, and we all respond differently to art, film, TV, music, and each other. Perfection is perception. It's all about how you feel, and as technology and society grow and evolve over time, our perspectives grow along with them. The gaming industry in particular has changed drastically over the past 3 decades. Storytelling, character development, audio, visuals. We're at a place now where games can provide players with captivating experiences that simply weren't possible during the 80s and early 90s. So, in today's gaming climate, what exactly makes Super Mario World so special? Does it have the deepest story in the world? Well, it's a Mario game, of course it doesn't. Is it void of any mistakes or glitches or technical hiccups? Certainly not. I have no idea how I died from making Yoshi eat a Wiggler. I don't know how going into this warp pipe made this Buzzy Beetle slide to the right while the other two stayed in place. I'm not sure how I got hit by and also jumped off this paratroopa at the same time. And I'll never understand how going through the normal exit in Chocolate Island 3 with half of Mario's sprite cut off makes the colors freak out. I still love making this happen, though. A lot of what I think makes this game so special is undeniably a result of nostalgic bias. It's the first game I ever played, therefore it's the best. But objectively, Super Mario World is also one of the most perfectly designed platformers ever made. This game caters to those that want to play through it normally, people that want to breeze through it as fast as they can, and those that want to experience the world and find every possible secret. And no matter how you play it, you'll learn some new tricks, make new discoveries, and never, ever get bored. Super Mario World is so deceptive in its simplicity, but under the surface you find layers and layers of sophistication, thought, careful planning, dedication, and passion. It's a game that makes you feel what the developers felt when they made it. For parts of it, you're on the edge of your seat, but there's not an ounce of cynicism to be felt. Just pure, unadulterated joy. So there's really no point in asking what my new verdict on this game is, because it was obvious before we even got to the 30-second mark. I loved it as a kid, I loved it when I first reviewed it, and I still love it now. From a visual standpoint, this game looks fantastic, and the art style has aged remarkably well. The jump from 8-bit to 16-bit allowed the designers to give the game a richer, more vibrant color scheme, and have the characters more closely resemble Yoichi Kotabe's iconic artwork. Except for Luigi, who's still just a recolor of Mario, unless you're playing the All-Stars port. And I'm not sure though if the lid of Mario's hat is supposed to be black, or if that's just his hair. But then there's the music, which is absolutely wonderful. Easily one of the top 3 best Mario soundtracks of all time. Koji Kondo was apparently overjoyed to work with the SNES sound chip, and you can genuinely feel that excitement when listening to the songs. He also decided to use this as an opportunity to introduce players to different music genres, so rather than focus on writing multiple themes for the game, Kondo took the same melody, which may or may not have been stolen from a 1960s folk song called Green Green, and rearranged it in different styles, keys, tempos, and time signatures to make it appropriate for the feel of each stage. Kazumi Totaka tried to do something similar when he did the music for Super Mario Land 2, and I love his main theme for that game, but whether it has to do with Totaka's writing, or more likely the limitations of the Game Boy's hardware, the soundtrack ends up lacking in variety. Kondo not only managed to find a great melody, but because his rearrangements are all so clever, he makes it sound fresh and new all over again every time you hear it. It can be fun, exciting, relaxing, scary, suspenseful, and never repetitive. I also like this bit where I brought a key to a keyhole while I was invincible, and then the Starman wore off during the keyhole animation, which caused the music to get cut out by the overworld theme. That was pretty funny. But it's not like he found one good song, repeated it over and over, and half-assed everything else, because the rest of the soundtrack is just as great. Most of the game's areas have their own unique themes, like Yoshi's Island, Vanilla Dome, Forest of Illusion, and the Valley of Bowser, while the Donut Plains theme applies to the rest of Dinosaur Land as a whole. The credits theme is also, in my opinion, the best a Mario game has ever had. It's catchy, toe-tapping, and perfectly encapsulates the entire experience you just had. Even the little things, like how riding Yoshi adds a bongo track to the music, or how waiting on the Special Zone map for over 2 minutes without entering a level rewards you by switching to an arrangement of the Super Mario Bros. Theme, or in the GBA version where using the P-balloons slows the tempo down slightly, stuff like that turns the music into another memorable character and adds an extra layer of fun, depth, and playfulness to the game. In that sense, I think Super Mario World serves as a testament to Kondo's masterful composition skills. This soundtrack is truly one of a kind, and presumably it must have been popular enough to warrant a 2-disc compilation album released in February 1991 exclusively in Japan. The first disc contains tracks from Mario 1, Mario 3, and The Lost Levels, but the second disc featured jazz arrangements of mostly Mario World tracks written by Soichi Noriki and performed by the Mario Club Band. appropriate considering how reinterpretation was so key to the original compositions. You've probably heard some of these covers before, but never knew exactly where they came from. I've used them in plenty of my videos, and there's a reason for that. They're freaking amazing. You can easily find playlists for the entire Jazz album on YouTube, so go check it out and vibe to your heart's content. The longevity of Nintendo's hardware is often driven by sales, as is typical with video game manufacturers. But among the majority of fans, it seems as though new Nintendo consoles aren't immediately worth upgrading to unless Mario's got something new to offer. And with the success of Super Mario World, the SNES pretty much solidified Mario's place as the king of console sellers, as every new Nintendo platform that followed would come with their own unique Mario games that convinced players to make that leap into the next generation. In that sense, I think Super Mario World might be one of the most important games Nintendo's ever made. If anything, because it faced the biggest uphill battle and had the most to accomplish out of all the SNES launch titles. It had to be Nintendo's answer to questions like, what is there to play on the Super Nintendo that I can't already play on my old Nintendo? Why should I get an SNES and not a Sega Genesis? This is why. And now here we are, over 30 years later. Nintendo won the console wars before falling into second place behind the PlayStation. Sega ultimately did themselves in by consistently making the worst business decisions possible. And Super Mario World is still considered to be one of Mario's greatest adventures, if not his absolute greatest. Obviously, Mario's had tons of other games since, many of which are also phenomenal, like Galaxy and Odyssey, what have you, but Super Mario World is such a lightning in a bottle moment in his career, such a carefully thought out, perfectly executed experience that, in my opinion, none of Mario's subsequent releases have ever really been able to top. That's what I think anyway. Fans still compare this game to Super Mario Bros. 3, mostly when discussing the pinnacle of 2D Mario. We're very geeky when it comes to this stuff. But really, any debate over which one's better is all a matter of preference. Both are fantastic in their own right, and it's hard not to see the merits in either one. Mario 3 has more power-ups, more levels, and to an extent more variety, but Super Mario World essentially takes everything that made previous Mario games connect with players and perfected it in just about every conceivable way. I would also argue that Mario 3 is catered more towards seasoned Mario players and isn't very beginner-friendly, which, in a way, kinda gives it a more limited appeal. Super Mario World harkens back to the simplicity of the original Super Mario Bros., where it's so simple and easy to grasp that anyone can pick it up and play it, but with its added mechanics, exciting sense of progression, alternate routes, and smoother controls, it not only holds up much better, but it's also more replayable. Since Super Mario World was released during the midpoint of Mario's formative years, this game left a lasting impact on the franchise moving forward. It was the first Mario game to have save files, so you didn't have to leave the console on overnight to resume your progress the next day. It introduced visible checkpoint markers that even turned Small Mario into Super Mario when you walk through them, a feature that later 2D Mario games would also include, and even some of the 3D games. It was the focus of the first 6 volumes of Super Mario-kun, the long-running manga series that's still going to this day. The idea of a large interconnected world map would later be incorporated into New Super Mario Bros. U, which also saw the return of Baby Yoshis, enemies like Chargin' Chucks, and this game's version of the Goombas, later renamed Galoombas, were reintroduced in Super Mario 3D World. It got its own microgame in both WarioWare Gold and WarioWare Get It Together. It was featured as a graphic style players could use in both Mario Maker games. It was the last Mario game to be made into an animated series by Deke Entertainment, which ended up being the shortest at only 13 episodes since it was originally grouped in with the 3rd season of Captain N the Game Master. And it was also greatly affected by changes in FCC regulations, so Princess Toadstool's character was completely retooled and it dealt with subjects like gangs, addiction, and capitalism. But it also gave us some great memes.
Say the line, Bart!
That's Mama Luigi to you, Mario! Yeah!
Obviously, though, the biggest contribution Super Mario World made to the franchise was the character of Yoshi. And like Wario, he was popular enough to get his own spin-off games, including the subject of our next video, Yoshi's Island, which doesn't technically count as a mainline Mario game, but I did review it as part of the Mario Marathon all those years ago, so however long it takes for me to get there, that's the game we'll be revisiting next time. But until then, I hope you enjoyed this frankly exhausting Super Mario World tribute. I hope I gave you a new perspective on the game, and if you somehow have yet to play it until now, I hope I inspired you to give it a look. And I'm not going to bother with any of the self-promotion stuff, but before I go, I do want to give a very special thank you to my Superstar supporters for this month, Red Rack, Henry Newman, and Jake Winans. I always have nothing but the biggest amount of love and appreciation for you and everybody else that watches my videos. So, yeah, to everybody else watching, thank you. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, this is Mark, aka SuperSmash3DS, bidding you all a smashing farewell. Be good, behave, be safe, and I'll see you next time. Take care.